Hello, welcome back, everyone. If I didn't meet you before, I'm David. I'm the moderator for this evening. So I quickly like to remind everyone again that you can ask questions in the chat or in the Ask the ShinyConf speakers channel in the Shiny for All workspace on Slack. Now, for our next talk, we'll be joined by Albert Rapp, who is currently working as a business analyst at Meta Finance, and he'll be giving a short talk on his experience of using Shiny for Python that uses, quote, some of the hot AI stuff. So without further ado,
I
over to
was
you, Albert.
creative in that description.
Oh,
So I guess my audio is working, which is unfortunate. I was kind of looking forward to the stories you're going to tell when my audio isn't working.
I was terrified at the thought of having to conjure them up.
Well, good for you. I'm ready to go. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to my talk on unlocking new technologies with Shiny. And allow me to introduce myself. I am Albert Rapp. I work as a consultant and a content creator. Some of you may know me from YouTube tutorials that I do or stuff that I post on LinkedIn or previously Twitter before that space became rubbish. So I have been doing content creation for a while. I also do a weekly email newsletter, so some of you may know me. For those of you who don't know me, nice to meet you. And as was said already, I have a 80% position at Meta Finance, which allows me to spend one day out of my week on content creation. And at Meta Finance, we do, among other things, AI. So our primary focus is IT consulting, and one of the topics that I am in is AI. And we do that primarily with Python and R, but we also use some other stuff some of the time. And on my content creator side, I just use R, or I have been using only R in the past, which is for my YouTube channel and for my newsletter. So why am I mentioning my employer who has nothing to do with the ShinyConf where I'm going, which allows me to go here? I'm mentioning this because Meta Finance is actually part of the story because I've started there after coming from academia. So I finished my PhD in mathematics last year, and I wanted to start at Meta Finance, and I wanted to practice a bit of Python and the AI stuff because these are the two things I anticipated working with. And so far, I have been working mostly with R, and I felt like I should practice a bit before actually starting on the job. So that's why I decided to go to Hugging Face, which is basically a repository for AI models. If you don't know it, it's very easy to use. You just go to Hugging Face, select from the task on the left the stuff that you want to do. In my case, I wanted to figure out how to go from a text to an image. And here I just chose a model from Stability AI. And then to make that stuff work, you just take the code snippets that the Hugging Face pages give you, insert it into a Python script, and then you're good to go. It's really as easy as that to get started with AI using Hugging Face. So that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I did. I picked the model, and then I just, in that model, there was one of the parameters was prompt. So I wanted to create a plugin space. And I know this is majestic, and this is what was really easy to create. So I wanted to go one step further. And I figured I wanted to try out to wrap this prompt, not work from the console with this, but from a user interface. And obviously, I already knew Shiny from R. So I figured, well, I could use reticulate to call my Python script from R Shiny and then wrap a UI around that, around the script that way. But then I remembered that there is this thing called Shiny for Python now. And I figured, well, I wanted to learn Python too. So I guess I will just try out this thing. And right from the beginning, I noticed that R Shiny and Py Shiny, they are kind of the same thing. Maybe this meme is a little bit over dramatic. Of course, it's not 100% the same. There are differences in syntax, But really, if you know R Shiny, you won't have any trouble to use Shiny for Python, which was good for me starting at a Python place because it helped me to, in the first couple of days, to just create a user interface really easily with something I was already pretty comfortable with because the ideas translated so well from R Shiny. Okay, and to illustrate the similarities, let me give you a little tutorial on Shiny for Python. And if you know R Shiny, then you will probably have no problem following along. So let's think about R Shiny. The way an app is structured is that you have the library that you call Shiny, then you have some HTML and CSS, in this case, Fluid Page just generates that for you. That's the user interface. And then you have as a server basically a function that takes 3 arguments: input, output, and session. And the Shiny app function puts all of that together. And that way you have a nice web app from R. And if you want to use PyShiny, then you will realize that really it is mostly the same. At the beginning, you have to import all the stuff that you want to use. You just have to get used to the Python thing where you do from this module import the functions that you want to use. And then you just define the app via a page fluid again. And for a server, you define a function which you do in Python with this def operator. And then the app is really nothing but the UI and the server put together again. So the idea fundamentally is the same, which was already a nice place to start with. But one thing I immediately noticed is that the naming convention in Shiny for Python is actually very nice and a nice improvement from R Shiny. Now, all of the things that are related to the UI, like UI elements, action buttons, input, any inputs, any pages, any layouts, all of that stuff is in the UI module. So you type in UI dot, and then if you want to have a page, you do page underscore. We'll later see that if you want to have an input, you will do input underscore and then do something else. Now, with R Shiny, if you're anything like me, you sometimes figure out, well, I want to do a drop-down menu. Can I do just input underscore drop-down? That would be really nice, but that's not possible in R Shiny. So that's why you have to kind of remember it is select input or selectize input. So with this naming convention, things actually got a little bit easier. And then, as I've said, the thing translates very well to the inputs. So if you want to have a slider input, you do input underscore slider. If you want to have a text input, you do input underscore text. And for the outputs, it's the same story. You just do output underscore text. And fundamentally, these functions work exactly the same way as in R. You have as a first argument the ID, then a label, and then you have the parameters for that specific input or output or whatever. Okay, so this part translates very well, but if you know R Shiny, you cannot think of a Shiny app without thinking about the sidebar layout, right? Every basic Shiny app tutorial starts out with this layout sidebar. At least it was like that for me when I learned Shiny. So I wondered, can I do this too in R Shiny and PyShiny? And the answer is yes. With layout underscore, you have all the layouts available to you. And in this case, the syntax is more or less the same as in R. You stick all of the things that you want to have in the sidebar into this sidebar function, and everything else that should go into the main panel just stays within the layout sidebar function. Okay, so all of that is pretty easy to build, but right now we have only focused on the UI side of things. But even if you just open up the UI, you will immediately see some nice improvements with PyShiny because it already incorporates all of the things that R Shiny didn't have out of the box. For me, I was kind of surprised to see that the sidebar menu could move in and out via this toggle. And this is something I like to use in R, but I have to use the bslib package for that. And with PyShiny, these nice little improvements just come out of the box. So how about making stuff happen inside of the server? If you want to render an output, you will have to do an output, $, the ID, and then assign render text call to this. And then inside of this render text, you basically just stick in a function or a whole lot of expressions, and the result of that is what is passed to the output. Basically, you define a function. You could think of that inside of these curly brackets inside of the render text. And the PyShiny version of this translates pretty well to this, and it even takes less notation. You immediately inside of the server define the function that becomes the output. So if you wanted to have the output with the ID text output return something, you just define a function called text underscore output. So this was the ID that we used in the UI. And then it's just a regular function, but to make it similar to the R version, you have to figure out, well, you have to wrap a render text around this, and you have to specify that it's an output. And this is where these function decorators in Python come in. It's this add notation that you just kind of have to get used to. At first, I felt like it was weird because I came from R, but this is truly a Pythonic way to do things. I've later realized when I was working at my day job with Python with some AI agents lib that these function decorators are something people like to use. And here we use these function decorators to make sure that the function behaves as a basically rendering engine. Okay, so fundamentally the syntax is a little bit different, but the ideas translated very well. And then if you know the reactivity from R, you won't be surprised that everything just works automatically. This is one of the rare occasions where frameworks just transcend programming languages. All of the nice concepts from Shiny are pretty similar in R and Python, and they work very similar too. And if you know me, or if you know my content, then you will know that I try to make things look nice. So I was wondering, how can I style things in R, in Python? I already know how to style things in R. If you take just a regular action button, you see once again that the syntax is more or less the same. Then in R, as well as in Python, you can just add the style argument to this and then just throw in a text with a bunch of key value pairs from CSS to style that particular UI element. But of course, this becomes tedious very fast because, well, the working with just one string is kind of annoying. So this is why in R, you usually use the HTML tools package and use the CSS function from there to list all of these key value pairs in a nice R fashion. And that way you can throw in a whole bunch of CSS key value pairs to make the button look like you want. And I was thinking about this when I was thinking, okay, now I want to style things in Shiny for Python 2. There probably isn't an HTML tools package. Or is there? The kind people of Posit were actually, once again, very kind and just gave us HTML tools there as well. And then I just could basically take the code and stick that into the CSS function from the HTML tools Python package, and the outputs were more or less the same. Some things, especially in the beginning, look different because these UI elements have different default values. But in principle, you can use the same strategies to style the app the way you want. So now you could insert this button into your app. Here I might have used a smaller button, but whatever, it is in there. The question now becomes, how do we make it actually react to something? And this is where we know from R Shiny is where reactive events come in. And in R, you would just use this render text thingy that you had initially and pass this to bind event to bind this whole rendering process to some changes in this case, the input $my cool button, which is the ID of the button that I used. And you could also use observe event. It's kind of the same thing. I like to use bind event, but in principle, you have to remember just wrap the render function that you already have into something that binds this part to an event. And with PyShiny, it's the exact same thing. You just once again have to get used to this function decorator notation. In this case, you will have to use the reactive.event decorator, and that way you can more or less do the exact same thing, but just in a Pythonic way. And that way you can type in stuff, change things in the UI, but it only renders when I click the button. Unfortunately, you won't see my cursor here, but the point here is that things only start to happen when I click on the button. So really the changes are pretty similar to, or the things you have to do to make this work is very similar to the way you are used to from R. So as for my AI Hugging Face interface or user interface that I wanted to build, really all I had to do is to wrap all of the script from Hugging Face into a function that I could call within my Shiny for Python app. And then I just added some sliders, a text input, and a button, just like I've demonstrated with the dummy app. And then I made the button reactive to execute the script. And that way I could toggle parameters of that image generation model and put in prompts like 3 majestic pugs floating in outer space, living their best life, having fun. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty happy with the result of being able to generate as many pugs as I want. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you for that. We have one question from the audience. It says, is PyShiny using Bootstrap 5 by default?
I'm not 100% sure, but I would guess it is. That is true. Because all of these nice things that we have to use BSlib and R for, they just happen in PyShiny out of the box. So my guess would be that they also try to use Bootstrap 5 out of the box, but I would have to look it up to be sure.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm curious, is there anything that you noticed when you were using Shiny for Python that you assumed would be added into the Python version that is sort of very trivial in the R version? You know, you talked about some of the differences there in how you implement stuff, but is there anything missing from the Python version that you would sort of want to see there?
I know I have been at that point where I was thinking this is available in R, but I can't seem to find an easy way to do this in Python, but I can't think of the example right now. But I have heard other people say that some things are just missing, which is probably fine. I mean, it's just Shiny, R Shiny is just older, so I guess there's more functionality. But really with PyShiny, you can notice that a lot of functionality is already there. And in the API and the output, you see already all of the improvements that just came later to R Shiny with BSlib and so on.
Okay. What sort of other projects do you expect that you'll be building in PyShiny in the future?
That's a good question. I'm currently thinking about building a kind of chat model. I wrote this R package called Tidy Chat Models that allows you to communicate with different chatbots like ChatGPT or Mistral AI and so on. And I kind of want to build a Shiny app, both in R and in Python, because I really like to see when you can use both languages to accomplish the same thing. And that's where I want to use both Shinies to create an app that can use all of my pre-built prompts that I use all of the time. For example, for my newsletters, I have one prompt that transcribes or that summarizes all of my voice transcripts to a markdown text. So that gives me a little bit of productivity boost. And these kind of things, I have a couple of them, and it's just annoying to go into a script, type something in there. It would be cool to have a user interface to just select the chat bot that I need for a specific task.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for your time, Albert. I really appreciate it today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.